Welcome yet to another exciting video, in this case episode 5 of my Star Trek The Original Series episode breakdown video series. In this video I'll be looking at Season 2 episodes 36 to 41 of Star Trek The Original Series or Generation to identify historical references which can be used to determine the original history of the Star Trek universe. The episode order I'm using in this video series is the production order. In order to understand the development of the history or vision of Star Trek, we need to study the episodes in the order they were written. While I'm uncertain of the exact writing order, the production order is about as close as I can confirm. The episode order information as broadcast is also included. Special thanks to the transcripts which can be found on the Chakotay site. When Gene Roddenberry created Star Trek back in 1966, he had a vision which remained basically consistent over the following 3 years. The animated series and early movies retained this consistency in the most part. When The Next Generation was released in 1987, Gene's vision had changed, and the past needed to change in order to be consistent with this new vision. This video series will look at the original vision of Star Trek, starting with the earliest source material. Any historical facts from later sources which contradict the earlier references will be assumed to be an error. Minor changes in nomenclature can be, of course, excused. Wolf in the Fold is the 14th episode of the second season. It was the 36th episode produced. Its stardate is 3614.9 and its original air date was the 22nd of December 1967. In this episode we're introduced to another planet, this time Argelius. Argelius is an alien planet where the inhabitants focus on pleasure. Sounds like my kind of place. The episode also discloses another planet, in this case Rigel 4. It's likely Rigel 4 is a human planet of some description. This episode also introduces an alien called Rejak, which is an alien life force which feeds off fear, hatred and anger. The alien was Jack the Ripper on Earth. It must have travelled further out from Earth, targeting worlds which suited its needs. Another planet is mentioned in this episode, in this case Alpha Carina 5. This is likely an alien planet. Another planet is mentioned, in this case Alpha Majoris 1. A third planet is mentioned, in this case Alpha Iridanti 2, which is a human planet. Rejak murders 10 women on this planet in 2156, so it must be reasonably developed. The Martian colonies experience a series of murders in 2105, which is 150 years ago. This is well before the Earth-Romulan War and just after the invention of warp drive. It's assumed these colonies were reasonably developed by this year, as why would the creature go to a sparsely populated colony planet? The United Earth Territories probably spanned 50 light years in all directions from Earth in 2060, so this planet was probably in that area and had 40 to 50 years to develop. The episode mentions there's another planet which Rejak murders people on, in this case Deneb 2. It must be reasonably developed to have a population which Rejak would find attractive. In this episode we discover the Enterprise has 440 humans on board. The indication is the population of the Enterprise ranges from between 400 and 440 depending on whatever mission it's on. In this episode we get a list of a reasonable number of planets. Argelius, an alien planet inhabited by humanoids but probably not of Earth. Rigel 4, while it's not stipulated this may well be a human planet. Rigel 2 and Rigel are both human planets which are not colonies, so are probably members of the Federation. Rigel 4 may be the same. It's also illogical considering the alien which feeds on fear seems to like humans. Alpha Carina 5, which is almost certainly an alien planet. It's unknown if it's a Federation planet. I suspect not. Deneb 2, of which we have almost no information. The inhabitants must be humanoid and probably human, so this is probably a Federation Earth planet. Alpha Iridanti 2, which is probably an Earth planet, probably a member of the planet of the Federation, which was developed in 2156, which means it's more than 100 years old, exactly 116 years old. The murder occurred during the Earth-Romulan War. It's a rather old planet. Martian colonies, which are colonies of non-colony Mars, experienced 8 women knifed to death in 2105, which is after warp is devised and before Zephyrin Cochrane disappears. These colonies were probably within 50 light years of Earth and may have had 40 to 50 years to develop and populate before the creature went there to feed. In the episode, we discover the Enterprise now has a crew, or a population, of almost 440, so the crew, or population number, must fluctuate quite a bit. We discover an alien non-corporeal form which feeds on fear, called, among other things, Reject. It was on Earth around 1900, so it would be interesting to determine how it got onto Earth. It claimed to have lived before the dawn of time, so may represent a very early life form. On the other hand, what would it feed on at the dawn of time? The Changeling is the third episode of the second season. It was the 37th episode produced. Its stardate is 3451.9 and its original air date was the 29th of September 1967. The Malurians, which are mentioned in this episode, are an alien race which lives in a system or systems consisting of 4 planets. The population was 4 billion people. All were eliminated by Nomad. The Federation had a science team working with them. Presumably the Federation team was also eliminated. In the episode, the Enterprise shield was able to absorb 90 photon torpedoes and could do this 4 times. This seems highly implausible and unrealistic. We discover in this episode Earth sent a probe called Nomad out in the early 2000s to search for new life forms. The diagram says 2002. It was damaged and eventually merged with a powerful alien probe. As Nomad was heading towards Earth, possibly it was coming from the far side of the Malurians, which presumably were an alien race well beyond Federation space. Unless it was randomly moving around, it must have travelled an immense distance. I suspect it did travel an immense distance, but once damaged, it floated around going nowhere for a great period of time before merging and starting to destroy life. This merging may have occurred recently, otherwise we would hear of great swaths of the galaxy being sterilized. Nomad must have an FTL drive, which means it may have used an early version of Impulse Drive with FTL capability. It may have been the first FTL probe. As the Vulcans may have made contact with Earth as early as 1996, or more likely 1997, it gave Earth 5 years to create this early copy of the Vulcan Impulse Drive. The Federation are in contact with a 4-planet civilization called the Malurians, which consisted of 4 billion people. They must have been an alien race and probably beyond Federation space, most likely not part of the Federation. They were eliminated by Nomad. We know the Federation sent a probe out in the early 2000s, which seemed to use FTL drive. If the probe lacked FTL drive, then even if it was somehow propelled to light speed, somehow, it could never stop anywhere to check for life. So this is unlikely. But let's just pass for the moment. If this occurred, it would have travelled a maximum of 262 light years from Earth, which puts it firmly in Federation space. This means it's unlikely it lacked FTL drive. While it's possible, and as another theory, the Malurians were within a Federation member and within 262 light years of Earth, it does not explain the alien probe. This probe was of a superior level of technology and power and was searching for planets to colonize. It's unlikely this would be occurring well in Federation space without the Federation knowing about it. The probe used FTL drive, a very early version, and possibly a test or prototype impulse drive. We use ion drives for our probes today, well before any use of ion drive for manned spacecraft. We assume the SS Valiant took 20 years to travel 400 light years. If the probe speed was a quarter and travelled for a maximum of 240 years, it could have travelled 1200 light years. That's a bit far, so I suspect its real distance travelled, or the distance travelled, is no more than 800 light years, and it spent almost 100 years floating around doing nothing. I strongly suspect this was the first FTL probe. Perhaps it was an early form of impulse drive. The primary power system was called AN57 and the drive was called Magnet Oni du Dynamic Venier Pulse 16K3. The word pulse is included, so if we add im in front of it, we end up with impulse. The diagram has a date of 2002. The probe was destroyed and floated around a long time before merging with an alien probe of immense power, after which it started sterilizing planets. There may be an unknown, very powerful race well beyond the Malurians. The reason why I think the Nomad was floating around for a long time is because if it was operational for 100 years, it would have left a swath of death across the galaxy. My guess is the Malurians were possibly even one of its first targets. Thus, it would have been fully repaired only shortly before 2265. The Apple is the 5th episode of the second season. It was the 38th episode produced. Its stardate is 3018.2 and its original air date was 27th of October 1967. In this episode, we discover an unexplored new planet, Gamma Trigulium 6. For a second time, we are reminded the Federation uses currency in this episode. Gamma Trigulium 6 has an automated guardian called wahre, which looks after and controls the people of the planet, who in turn feeds it with human food. Not sure why, but there it is. There is no clue who built wahre or how old it is. If it was built by the preservers, it could be 10,000 years old. Spock mentions in the episodes the existence of the non-interference directive, a precursor to the Prime Directive, perhaps. The main piece of information we glean is the existence of an alien people living on a new planet called Gamma Trigulium 6. By the end of the episode, it becomes clear these people are not a member of the Federation. Also, if they like it or not, they are unable to look after themselves, being looked after by wahre in the past. Some minor information is also provided. The Federation does use currency, and we get the first reference of a Prime Directive, although it's not called that specifically. Mirror Mirror is the 4th episode of the second season. It was the 39th episode produced. Its stardate is unknown and its original air date was the 6th of October 1967. In the episode we discover another alien planet, Halcyon, probably not part of the Federation and refusing to allow mining by the Federation. It has dilithium crystals on it. In the episode we discover or enter an alternate universe where the Federation is an empire and rules in a manner not unlike the Klingons. In this alternate universe, Kirk assassinates Pike. This is clearly a bad Kirk. In this alternate universe, we're told of a Gorlan uprising. Presumably the planet Gorlan revolted, so maybe in the Federation now. It looks like a member of the Federation based on the name. It is probably alien. Also in the alternate universe, we hear of a colony planet called Vega 9. Again, it's assumed to also exist in the Federation. This looks like an Earth colony. In this episode, Spock speculates that the alternate universe, or in the alternate universe, the Empire will fall by 2505, or at least that is when there is a galactic revolt that is supposed to occur. In this episode, we can add 3 planets to our list. Halcyon is an alien non-Federation planet, Gorlan looks like an alien Federation member, and Vega 9 is an Earth colony planet. Halcyon must be beyond Federation space. There is a Vega colony, perhaps this is Vega 1, thus it looks like there are up to 9 Earth colonies in the Vega system, or systems. Apart from this information, all the information we get is about an alternate human empire. Kirk assassinates Pike, the Federation is replaced by a militaristic empire, which is predicted to fall about 2505. As it's a galactic vault, it's assumed the empire will end up being much larger than possibly the Federation. Maybe they conquer the Klingons and Romulans while they're expanding. The Deadly Years is the 12th episode of the second season. It was the 40th episode produced. Its stardate is 3478.2 and its original air date was the 8th of December 1967. Gamma Hydra 4 is an experimental colony. We know that if you travel to Starbase 10, you'll go through the Romulan neutral zone. Gamma Hydra 4 and Starbase 10 must be very close to the neutral zone, with a bit of the neutral zone sticking out in between them to allow for this to occur. In this episode, we get the mention of Starbase 10. The episode also mentions another planet, Aldebaran 3, but we are uncertain what type of planet it is. As research was being done, I have to assume it's probably another research planet, again human. Apart from the obvious episode plot points, the main information is 3 new planets are identified. Gamma Hydra 4, which is an experimental colony planet, with a small outpost of scientists, Aldebaran 3, which I assume is also an experimental colony planet, as research on plants was being conducted there. It may now be a full colony planet with colonists. Finally, another starbase, in this case Starbase 10, and of course starbases are planets. Mud is the 8th episode of the second season. It was the 41st episode produced. Its stardate is 4513.3 and its original air date was the 3rd of November 1967. We are never given its actual name, but there is an outpost of a lost civilization on an uninhabited planet in this galaxy. Warp 7 for 4 days could have allowed them, that is, the Enterprise, to travel 12 light years, which seems rather small. Perhaps the Enterprise was already at the edge of Federation explored space when this particular episode occurred. The androids on this planet were created by a civilization from Andromeda, which was destroyed by a supernova. Only a few outposts survived, the one in the Milky Way being one. The androids looked after the Andromedan survivors, but they eventually died out, that is, the Andromedan survivors. Later, we are told if you place a human brain in an android, it would operate for 500,000 years, so it's possible the home planet was destroyed more than 500,000 years ago. We discover in this episode one of the androids, that is the Alice model, has a duration or lifespan of 500,000 years. In this episode, Mudd mentions a new planet, a Deneb 5. We know there is a Deneb 2 and a Deneb 4, both of which are Human Federation member planets. While I originally thought this was an alien planet, it's probably likely to be another human planet. If alien, it may have been primitive when the Federation arrived, allowing Earth to colonize other planets in the same system. Deneb 5 implies there is a Deneb 1 to 3 as well. Key takeaways from this episode as we discover another Federation planet, this time Deneb 5. A now dead civilization in the Andromeda galaxy had an outpost in the Milky Way inhabited by androids. It's possibly the last of the aliens. Died out a long time ago, with their home planet being destroyed by a supernova more than 500,000 years ago. There are other outposts somewhere, presumably not in the Milky Way. Many of the latter Star Trek movies and shows do not align with the original vision of the series. This is common in real history, as later historians attempt to change the past to justify their beliefs in the present. As I personally enjoyed the original vision of Star Trek, I would hope future material would come back to its original roots. However, I doubt that will ever occur. This concludes episode 7 of my Star Trek, the original series episode breakdown video series. In this case, covering Season 2, episodes 36 to 41. Alle guten Ding, kommen zu einem Ende.